Welcome to the Executive Espresso podcast, a sharp and to-the-point leadership podcast with insights from some of Australia's top executives. Welcome to today's episode of the Executive Espresso. I'm thrilled to have a very special guest with me today, Thinus Keeve. Thinus is a dynamic and innovative senior executive and a leader with a wealth of experience in various industries. Thinus has held several prominent positions throughout his career, including the CEO and Managing Director at BWX Limited and the Chief Sustainability, Property and Export Officer at Coles. And he has consistently demonstrated his ability to build high-performance teams that deliver sustainable results. His strategic and execution capabilities have been honed through his diverse experiences, including his time at SAB Miller, where he managed a portfolio with revenue exceeding $918 million US. I hope you'll enjoy the conversation where Thinus shares his insights on people leadership and authenticity. Thinus, welcome to the Executive Espresso.
Thank you, Virg. Good to be here today.
Excellent. Now, we've known each other for a couple of years now, Thinus.
Yeah.
You've had an incredible career and journey so far. How have your experiences and your past roles, have they affected your approach to leadership?
Well, I was fortunate to spend my career in various industries, various countries, and doing various different things. And all those experiences are pulled together to probably who made me the leader I am today. As you can hear, your audience will hear from our accents. We're both South African. But my career actually started in Singapore and worked, with a different cultural outlook. That's probably the first time when I saw the different cultures, and Singapore is very multicultural. How different cultures treated business, and then probably going into Europe, back in South Africa, and then in Australia, has shaped me quite significantly along the path of my career.
Have you, over the years, in those different pockets of the world, did you see different styles and different ways of people leadership and people management?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always think there's a huge difference between continental, let's call it cultures. But even, one of the biggest cultural adjustment I had to make was between Australia and South Africa.
Yeah, right.
And you think we are very aligned in how we do things. We all love cricket. Yes, we're completely different, but there is a similarity, maybe the British influence, etc. But I was actually surprised in my coming over to Australia how different the cultural adaptation was to what I was used to when I was in management in South Africa.
Yeah, that's fascinating to hear that, because so many South Africans come across and do very well. So did you, in those initial months and years of arriving in Australia and Melbourne in particular, did you have to adapt your style and your way of working?
I had to adapt a lot. You come over, you're a very driven person. But what you don't realize is with the directness, South Africans are, your audience will know, very renowned for being direct. And that drivenness with the directness, it wasn't a good combination, let's say. But if you can understand and how to manage that and drive that to be something beneficial to yourself, that makes a huge difference. But yes, did I have to adapt? Absolutely.
Do you think that's one of the characteristics of a good leader, is that adaptability?
Yes, it's one of them. Just to be able to adapt can also get you into survival mode. I think it's one of the key elements, adaptability, but you need to be, all the other things as well. Being adaptive is not going to get you to where you would want to be. But it plays a large part.
You've led teams across various environments, different portfolios, different size businesses, from multi-billion-dollar businesses to maybe a little bit more smaller. Have you, when you're looking at who's doing well within the organization, or if you're hiring into the organization, are there certain traits or characteristics that you look for in those people?
I always hire for resilience. Resilience is something, I think, when you possess resilience, we're all going to have failures along the line. It's how you overcome those failures and how you then grow from those failures. And that's why resilience is a really important piece for me. And that spans across cultures, continents to where I've worked in. So that, I would say that's probably the biggest thing I look for when I hire someone.
And it's a really nice way of putting it, right? With that, I think what goes hand in hand maybe with that is that whole idea of authenticity.
Yeah.
For you, what have you strived to be as authentic as possible from a people leadership perspective?
Yeah, it's quite funny. I've had a bit of a journey with authenticity. I think when you start out and you're a young gun and you just want to get things going, authenticity may fall to the wayside. But as you become more experienced over time, you do much larger roles, people look for that authenticity. And I mean, you can't teach that. You can say that to people, but what it really is takes a long time of developing and really honing that skill of what is an authentic leader. I mean, we all would have different views on what is an authentic leader. I'm just going to be true to myself and, the rest will come. But it's not that simple. Authenticity comes with a lot of words associated with it: vulnerability, honesty, directness, things like that. That's where authenticity grows. And I think great leaders become more authentic as they progress. We see world leaders around the world today. You see more authenticity in some leadership at the moment than what you've seen probably in a first term. Somebody once said to me, the longer you know people, the more you know. And that is true for leadership and authenticity as you progress and who you are, and you're just comfortable in that. And I probably wish that was the first of one of the biggest lessons, was just be yourself and you'll be okay. We always try to impress people. That's the wrong thing to do. I always say to young up-and-coming leaders, don't try and impress me. And everybody says, but they don't really explain what it means. Go and just be yourself. You do all the hiring work, developing people. Just be yourself.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Was there a pivotal moment in your career where that sort of light bulb switched on and you were like, yeah, wow, okay?
I wouldn't say there was a pivotal moment. I think it continues as you have tough experiences. But also, you also learn when you reflect on the successes you've had. How did you achieve them and what did you do? And I found you always achieve way more when you had your own values, your own beliefs. And that's probably the biggest growth you get from that authenticity perspective.
Over the years, I'm sure you've managed many, many very ambitious and driven up-and-coming leaders. Sometimes, at that 2IC level. What advice would you give them on, what they need to be focusing on and what they should be doing to make that next step in their career?
Think about the impact they can make at that specific level where they are. Many people say, I want to be the CEO, but they forget they've got a role to do currently. And it comes back to that authenticity that I spoke to in the beginning. Be yourself, make the impact, add the value. It's impossible to ignore you then.
When you're managing a lot of people and you still have to do your day job and you're dealing with stakeholders and writing board reports, et cetera, when do you actually find the time to do anything else?
I've become better at it. I think we all struggle with that, but especially over the last couple of years. I'm a firm believer you only live once. And if you say that to yourself in the morning when you're on the commute into the city or on your way to work, you don't get a chance again when your kids are young to put them to bed. You don't get a chance again when you my age to walk up mountains. You need to. That is up to you to manage. I have more arguments now with colleagues and people that I know about not doing or doing those things because I think they're missing that chance. I mean, you just have to read. It's always in the cheap press, or it's people on the at the end of life who says, "I." Nobody asked them how hard did they work. Nobody asked who they worked for. No, it is all about what did you do with your life. And for me, it is I want to be part of my kids' life. I want to be in it. I want to experience the moments, and that's a big thing. I want to go see the top of all the mountains in the world, of every single one, but the high ones. And those are so you have to set yourself personal goals, and you have to really, really test yourselves on that.
I mean, so it's hard trying to strike a balance, though.
I think you need to justify with yourself. There will be. I can give you. In my career, I have made trade-offs. I have gone the other way for a reason. If you've got a new role starting, you can't say, "Well, I'm off to the Bahamas," because I always wanted to see the Bahamas. Yeah, I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, you know what the big moments are, and by and large, you can manage it. But again, you have to be authentic about it. Your new manager won't know that it's your daughter's 5th birthday on the day that they have a massive board meeting. You have to be prepared on that. Make sure you've put all the meetings in before so that you can have that time away. But manage it. Nobody's going to do it for you.
There's a lot being said, especially in the last couple of years, about vulnerable leaders.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it earlier. That's part of the characteristic of traits of a good, authentic people leader. Can you dig a bit deeper into that in terms of putting yourself out there as a people leader, being vulnerable, what that looks like? Because you can have the soft skills and everything else that goes with that, but what does that actually look like, and what does that feel like to people that you're managing?
Yeah, I think I can share an example of vulnerability. I was eyes wide open going into an ASX listed business as the CEO who was in dire straits. And I had to show real vulnerable leadership during that time because the team wasn't taken on the journey. The team wasn't aware of how poor state the business was in. And I had to show an understanding for their vulnerability. I had to show an understanding for if we're not successful, if I was not successful as the CEO, what that would mean for the business. And I was in a position where at least I understood what was at stake, but the team didn't. And building that with authenticity, saying, guys, this is where we are sitting. These are the challenges. These are the permutations that can happen. I think the team really charged up the team to really understand this is where we are. And we had a phenomenal drive from the team, and it wasn't the outcome that we wanted, but at least people weren't blindsided and they felt we did everything we could in that situation. So that was quite empowering to see how people react in what is a real adverse situation, but understanding where they were and what was happening.
How did you strike that balance between vulnerability and still having the authority and being the CEO?
I think that comes back to transparency. Very clear on the decisions, why I'm making the decisions I was making. Communication. I mean, communication is so key. I got all the information, and what I could share that I felt relevant with the team, I shared immediately so that everybody knew where we were.
What's the hardest part for you around managing people?
Well, if I really think about people, we're all different with different outlooks, different stages of life. And managing a large group of people, that's always hard to understand what motivates each and every individual. And people talk about the third rule. Maybe they're right, maybe they're not. But it is communicating as much as possible to who you are as a leader, what your expectations are, what framework you want, and then driving with KPIs is a really, really important way, I think, of how you operationally succeed in driving large execution. And then there's one-on-one with your close leadership team. Listening is a very, very powerful tool. While even if you have a phone call and you just talk to people, try and end it, but how are you, etc. And people will tell you a lot of things that really helps you to understand what motivates them, where they're at, and how you solve their problems at that stage.
Now, on the other side of it, what's the best part of managing people?
Success.
How do you define success?
It. I mean, winning. Nobody. I've not met anybody who likes losing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe it. I've never met anyone who says, "I like losing."
Yeah.
And people like to win differently.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But knowing that you've achieved something, that you put some effort and work in, and you've been part of a broader group, team, whatever it is, that makes a difference. People go home, feel motivated. I have a fundamental belief nobody comes to work to do a bad job. There is not a single person in this world who wakes up to say, I'm going to do a bad job today and I'm going to lose and I'm going to go very happy. But if you can get everybody to work together, that's magic.
Yeah.
That's magic.
I suppose that's the magic dust that everybody is looking for, right? Like, how do you get a large group of diverse people on the same journey?
Absolutely. And all leadership books at some stage talk about that. How do you motivate an army? I mean, I was very lucky early in my career. I was working for a CEO at a very, very large organization, global organization. And I was the young, let's call it, project manager, sitting in board meetings with the CEO, etc. And he pulled me aside one day, probably in a session like this, a nice espresso as well. And he said to me, I think you've got a lot of talent, but the one thing you will need is you will need to get people to be very motivated from a distance. And I didn't really understand what he meant, but he put me in a role after that where I had a lot of people and I had to learn very quickly of how you motivate large teams, etc., like that. And that's stuck with me up until today. You have to get a large amount of people to be able to work together, and that's what you learn in these management books. All these guys, whether it's Bill Gates or Barack Obama, he would. There's at some stage you have to motivate a large group of people.
So many leaders out there have had mentors and they still currently do have mentors. What's your view on having mentors, when to use them, and how do you actually go about getting a mentor in the first place?
Yeah, mentors fulfill different roles at different periods for different people. I would say that first. So, first, understanding what you need. You personally, what do I need mentorship on? People say, have come to me many times and say, I need a mentor. Okay, but what do you want to work on? If you can answer that question of what do you want to work on, then the next step comes. It's futile to go and say, I need a mentor because I want to advance in my career. That's not a good enough reason. You need someone, and a mentor is absolutely brutally honest without impact. And what I mean by that, they're not going to affect your career, but they are going to say to you, Thinus, you're too driven, you need to slow down. And they will give you the hard feedback of how to handle yourself in situations better. And then it's up to you to work on it. And I'm a big fan of mentorship, but it only works once you can answer that question, what do I want to work on?
How do you personally deal with the critical feedback that you get from those mentors?
You got to be open to it. I mean, leaders never stop learning, and you have to learn, take the feedback on board. Look, there's been times when I've had mentors where I'm like, we're not getting along. This person is too, don't understand. Did you not know she or he said this, and this is why I reacted? It's a fine balance, and good mentors will give you that feedback, and it's above everything else. That's, you have to remember, the mentor doesn't see the situation, almost never. It's how that's then played to them, and they just make an objective view of what the situation or just what it is you're working on, and that's powerful. It doesn't work always, but it is very powerful.
I suppose as a, I'm generalizing here though, but as a group or as society in general, I feel like we're not very good at communicating with each other.
Because we all try to impress each other.
Yeah.
We try to impress. This is where I come back and authenticity. Just be yourself. Be completely honest. And that goes for capability, capacity, everything that we talk about. Life becomes so much easier when you're not trying to impress your new manager.
Yeah.
Your new managers hired you. You've impressed them. Great. Now be authentic of what you can do and can't do, and how you do it, and how they support you, and how they help you. And if you've listened to what I said at the beginning, you've hired someone with resilience, I always find they will be successful.
Yeah.
That's why people like yourself exist. Your role. I mean, you spent so much time in the hiring process, and you should, because that's where you can test people and how they are. And if you put a case study in, make sure they fail one completely dismally, and then pick them up and see how they react when they failed. Because I promise you, someone will fail along the lines in the role that you've recruited them in. How they fail is so important. Seeing that is amazing.
I've just finished the Atomic Habits on the Masterclass website, and he often talks about routines and doing a little bit every day to get that sort of 1% better. Do you follow a set routine?
I don't. I've probably got a different view on routines. It works for different people. Some people work better with routines, and some people don't. And that's also true for people that work with me, for me, and that I've worked with. It's really hard when someone forces you into a routine when people don't want routine. It's also really hard when there's no routine whatsoever and people like structure. So it's always a balance. It's always a balance. Myself, I like to be awake early to do exercise to get going with the day. But I'm not saying that's part of my success. When you think people wake up 5 a.m. and those are early bird catches the worm. As I progress in my career, I don't believe that's right anymore. That routine piece, I believe, is 50-50. But you have to understand there's people that like it and people that don't.
Something I ask every guest on the Executive Espresso is if they had the opportunity to have dinner with anyone in the world, both past and present, who would it be?
Well, there's quite a few, and I've thought about this question quite a bit when you read it on a magazine on the aeroplane. There's quite a few people who at the moment, Vladimir Zelensky. I would love having him around the table because
Lots of stories you could tell, right?
yeah, but also being an authentic leader. I think what he's going through, the way he's changed, being a bit of a comedian, started out and now he's leading an invasion against his own people is a big one. Probably on the lighter side, there's a couple of comedians that I wouldn't mind spending time on. Jeff Seinfeld, I think, is very would be
tell
very
a story, right?
yeah. And then there's artists. I mean, I'm a big fan of an artist called William Kentridge, who you may know from South Africa. Uh, William's dad was the solicitor for Nelson Mandela, but William he grew up in a very structured family, I would guess, but he was the arty one, and very, very successful artist.
He was an alumni of my high school.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. And I wouldn't mind having a guy like Greg Norman. I think he would just be an interesting. He's got great stories to tell. So there would be quite a few I wouldn't mind spending some time with.
From a leadership philosophy perspective, is there someone that you've looked up to over the years, or someone that you've kind of followed in terms of their leadership style or their way of doing things?
Oh, I hate when you say that's my only. I think everybody's got a little bit of something. There's it comes back to that authenticity. Take from everyone, but be yourself.
Yeah.
No one is like you. Uh, People, I've done so many tests where the either the recruiter on that side would say, "Did you know your profile is exactly like this leader and this leader and this leader?" And then you meet those leaders and you go, "Oof, I'm not like him or her or anything."
Yeah.
And that makes so yeah, I'm reluctant to answer that to say there's one leader I aspire to. I've had phenomenal managers in my life and my career. I've had terrible ones. And that's what happens in life, and you have to deal with all of that. Uh, but there are certainly traits. I mean, the humility of Nelson Mandela would be. Yeah, I was lucky to meet him a couple of times in my younger days. I mean, you really felt like when you spoke to him, you were the one in the room. Yeah, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. There's let's call it the South African rugby captain, and with a his vision setting is unbelievable.
Yeah.
The way he sets a vision um, is unbelievable. I see a Khaleesi. We are going to win the World Cup. It is. It's very clear. This is how we're going to do it. Everything is for it. And then there's the pragmatic approach from some of the Australian leaders. I think, if I think about a Prime Minister, John Howard, was very pragmatic. And I think the amazing gun laws we have in Australia, that takes something, but it's a pragmatic approach, unbelievable. But I wouldn't say I'm one of those three. I wouldn't even get close. But that's just how I see. Take the pragmatism, the vision, and the humility, and then you've got a phenomenal leader. And that's who I want to be. But there's not a single person.
So, what's the next big thing for you?
Look, there's lots of things always on the go. It's really important for me, if I think about what's next, how I surround myself with people that I really can make a difference with, and that's commercial outcomes and or not all, but and professional outcomes in growth myself. I like to be challenged. I like to be pushed. I like different debate, and that's the utmost of how I look at things and think where I would do what I'm doing, the way I'm reviewing businesses at the moment. If I go in, can I achieve those things?
Thanks so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe. You don't want to miss the next few episodes.